Hey everyone, it's John here from Hot Take Hockey to talk about my top 5 Stanley Cup favorites as it goes from this break from hockey we're in right now, this break from sports we're in right now. I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorites for the Stanley Cup if playoffs does come after this break. So I actually made a TikTok, so go follow Hot Take Hockey on TikTok. It's pretty new. I'm just trying it out to see if it gets some traction. A couple of the clips I've done so far have done pretty good. So I did a 1-minute clip just straightforward of my top 5 favorites. So I'm going to show the video here and definitely give the TikTok a follow. This is my 5 favorites for the Stanley Cup. Number 5, Edmonton Oilers. 2 reasons. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. Number 4, Philadelphia Flyers. Carter Hart, hot with the ladies. Hot streak for the Flyers. I mean, if you're talking about Claude Drew, filthy mitts, that's what I like to see. Number 3, St. Louis Blues. Bowman's got the Blackhawks out of the playoffs again. Not sure why hockey girls are repping Patty Kane, but my boy Terry Sancho is on his way back. Gonna slip a few Genos in the playoffs. Number 2, Tampa Bay Lightning. Yeah, they got swept. Maybe a couple years of being cup contenders. Now teams forget about them. Maybe they pull a little reverse sweep. Number 1, Colorado Avalanche. Bring back Nate McKinnon, Kadri, Rantanen, Grubauer, and this is what happens.
When you see the first player to get to the trophy, just throw it up. There are your Stanley Cup champions. This is the emotional picture, the one with the cup for the first time. For more content, hit up Hot Take Hockey on YouTube. So now to go into a little more detail and analysis here, because obviously that was straight 1 minute. It was for fun, entertainment. It didn't really give some background into why I made those 5 picks. And you know what, there's other teams. I want to talk about the Boston Bruins, obviously, because yes, the Bruins have been a very good team. I joke around the President's Trophy curse. That could be a thing for the Boston Bruins. I look at the situation of, do they have that depth? I mean, they acquired a guy like Andre Kasha that could really help the situation. I really don't know what would happen for the Boston Bruins coming back from the break if their momentum would continue, because if I'm looking at the Boston Bruins, they've been one of the most consistent teams in the NHL. Other than, I would say, maybe like a 2 or 3 week, struggle they went there. But even through that struggle, I mean, they're still the President's Trophy team, or at least the team that's on pace to win the President's Trophy. And if you're looking at the Boston Bruins, in terms of the question marks on depth, acquiring guys like Andre Kasha and Nick Ritchie, that definitely helps those question marks. And I think even for the older guys, we're talking about Patrice Bergeron and Zdeno Chara, even Tuukka Rask that's getting up there. Obviously, having this break and coming back for playoffs definitely helps that scenario for them and to prepare for a playoff run. So I do recognize the Boston Bruins. And for the Washington Capitals, I think if you're talking about a team that won back in 2018 and 2019, it was the St. Louis Blues. And I think the Washington Capitals are there. Like, if I made a list of top 10, the Capitals would obviously be there. I think for top 5, I just see teams like the Edmonton Oilers and Philadelphia Flyers having more of that spark in the last few months, where the Washington Capitals have had their inconsistencies, whether that's in terms of their goaltending. Even sometimes their defense scares me. I mean, if you're looking at John Carlson, outside of that, they don't really got any big studs, and they don't really got any guys that are consistent. I mean, Orlov offensively, sure, and you know he can throw a hit here and there, but I think that are the question marks. And we've seen the Capitals, some of their games do end up getting high-scoring games. So I think that's the question mark for me, but I think the Capitals are a legit contender. I would say Penguins are in conversation. I think a team like the Vegas Golden Knights, for sure. I had them as one of my early favorites at the start of the year. And then we're talking about the Dallas Stars. I think the Dallas Stars is another one. Some people think I don't give them enough love. We'll talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. The Dallas Stars, for one, I think Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn having a bounce back year on the back end. Heiskanen, Klingberg, and then Ben Bishop's just been crazy consistent. I think for the Toronto Maple Leafs, you lost to a Zamboni driver, but then won against the Tampa Bay Lightning 2 times in 2 weeks. So I don't know. It's difficult to say with the Toronto Maple Leafs if they can go into the playoffs and turn on that playoff gear. And I think for the Toronto Maple Leafs, if you make it past that first round, I think it's a big difference maker. So let's get to my reasoning for my actual top 5. So the Edmonton Oilers, I said my 2 reasons, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. I mean, that kind of boils down to those 2 players, but I think it's bigger than that. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, I think, is overlooked quite a bit, but he's a legit player. And then I think, obviously, players like Athanasiou, if he can come back with a different mentality, a different sense of play. Tyler Ennis, I think he's played very well so far with the Oilers. And then I think a guy like Mike Green, come back healthy. I think he really complements that defense group, Klefbom, Nurse, Larson. I think, obviously, in the offseason, I think, depending on how the situation goes in the playoffs, but still, I think they would like to add another guy into that top 4, but also considering that they need more guys in terms of offense, more depth in that bottom 6. But then again, you look at a different scenario, and this is more for off-season videos. They've got guys coming up on the back end. So goaltending, I think Mike Smith will really benefit from this break if, again, we do get playoffs. I think for Mike Smith, a lot older, but we've seen stretches of success for him, and if he can turn that on in the playoffs, then a tandem of him, and if Koskinen is in there as well, whichever goalie is hot, you ride with that goalie. So if Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are those kind of playoff performers, and we've seen it from both of those guys, it really reminds me of like the Malkin Crosby duo of what we've seen for them in the playoffs, but then even on a different level just in terms of what they've done this season. So I really like those two guys, and I really like the Edmonton Oilers. Number 4, Philadelphia Flyers. From the start, I was really high on the Flyers. I think if you're talking about their offense, I think they're one of the juggernaut offenses in the Eastern Conference, and I think they've been overlooked for way too long because of the inconsistencies and because of the struggles. I mean, you're going down the list and adding in JVR, who they just signed 2 years ago, right? So Claude Giroux, Konechny, Couturier, Voracek. I mean, Nolan Patrick if he can come back healthy, and then obviously JVR. I could go down the list, but my point is, I mean, the Flyers are legit offensively, and when they're on, they're on. Giroux obviously is the captain, he's the leader, but I mean, there's been other guys that have just had crazy success stories this year. I mean, Travis Konechny putting up the numbers in terms of goal scoring. Defense, I mean, you've gotten to step up, and I mean, obviously the additions of like Justin Braun and a guy like Niskanen have helped, and I thought Niskanen was going to bounce back, and he has for the most part. But then Provorov has really grown into a solid top 2-3 defenseman. Very legit defenseman. I think Gosh's Bears had his inconsistencies, but I think he's been fine this year. So I think as a defense group, they've been great. I mean, Provorov for me is the guy, but as a group, they've been great. And goaltending, I think Carter Hart, there was like some of the question marks at the start of the year, but I think he's really grown into that role, especially the last month or two. So I think he's ready to finally get his chance in the playoffs. And I mean, saying finally get his chance, he's only been here for a year, starting back last year. So we'll see what Carter Hart can do. But again, we saw what Binnington did, and yes, Binnington is older, but I think we could see that from Carter Hart going to the playoffs. And Brian Elliott, he's always there to back him up. So, all right, number 3, the St. Louis Blues, defending Cup champs. I don't think I need to go too much into the Blues. I've talked about the Blues so much. I've always been high on the Blues. I always was waiting years and years for them to break out and finally get that cup. They did. I mean, I think Ryan O'Reilly was the one addition that was like, obviously the goaltending change and the coaching change were like what were the main focuses, but Ryan O'Reilly, man, he's just that complete centerman. You put him around good players, and he wasn't really getting that in Buffalo. And obviously he had Jack Eichel, but that's not a line mate. That's not a line mate you get 5-on-5. And putting good wingers with Ryan O'Reilly, I think that was the big thing. Ultimate two-way centerman and Conn Smythe winner. So Ryan O'Reilly, I can go down the list. Bozak, the emergence of Robert Thomas, getting Tarasenko back from injury. David Perron's had a ridiculous year. Even guys like Sammy Blais and Zach Sanford. Like, obviously I can go into different situations with the St. Louis Blues, but even their depth guys are stepping up, and I think that's the big thing and why they're having such a successful year again, being first in the Central and being first in the West. And then obviously their defense. Pietrangelo, obviously there's the question marks of his free agency, and then you're looking at a guy like Justin Falk, Vince Dunn. You brought in a guy like Marco Scandella, and then obviously Bouwmeester. That is a very sad story, but I think the Blues are always a team that's rallying along, and they're rallying behind different causes. They're rallying around people around them. I could see a scenario where the Blues go into the playoffs, and if they can get past that second round, I think their toughest matchup, honestly, the way I'm seeing it right now, is going to be against the Avalanche. If it lines up that way, if the Avalanche win as I expect them to. Again, I'm not saying anything against the Dallas Stars, because I think the Stars are a great team. They've been very inconsistent, though, and they are coming off a losing streak, which this break could help them in that sense. But if I get that expected Blues Avalanche second round, I think it's going to be very comparable to the Blues Stars matchup of last year. So I'm just looking at that Blues Stars matchup. Patty Maroon scoring that game winner. Obviously, Patty Maroon's with the Lightning. Now, I think the Blues could get that matchup with the Avalanche, and I think that matchup might determine who out of the West goes to the Stanley Cup Final. Number 2, the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm going to be pretty straight with this. The Lightning, and I said it in the video, a couple of years of being strong Stanley Cup contenders, being favorites for a lot of people. This year, people are timid on picking them. People are timid on committing to them as their Stanley Cup favorite, I'm still standing by them as one of my favorites coming out of the East and in general. Honestly, I mean, you look at their team in general, and coming out of the break, if they get Stamkos back healthy, and Vasilevsky has definitely turned it on a little more in the second half of the year, I really like the Lightning. Thing is, they're still going to get tough matchups. They're probably going to get the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round, and they'll probably get the Boston Bruins in the second round. That's not easy. So, regardless, they're going to get tough matchups early. I like the Lightning. I think they're one of the most complete teams in the league. Sergachev has definitely stepped up. They've got their goaltending. I mean, you're talking about additions like Coleman and Gaudreau, and they paid those prices, and those guys are going to be playing bottom six roles. So that's insane. They've got their cap set up for next year. So even if I say the Lightning are not going to do it this year, they're set up for next year. Kucherov, Stamkos, Braden Point, Anthony Cirelli, Alex Killorn, Andre Palat, Tyler Johnson. It's ridiculous. So I think the Lightning, people can't forget about them. I think they're going to compete, and I think they are one of my favorites again this year. And then number one, the Avalanche. I'll tell you why I think the Avalanche, because I'm looking at the Blues last year. I'm looking at the Capitals the year before. I think momentum, people forget how big momentum is in hockey. The Avalanche were one of the best teams in the league, and they got injuries. They slowed down a little bit. They got a few losses here and there. These have been significant injuries. I mean, you're talking about Mikko Rantanen, McKinnon, Nazem Kadri, the number 2 guy. Power play at the start of the year was looking crazy, ridiculous. Landeskog, Kadri, Rantanen, McKinnon, Makar. I don't know how that won't be the top power play in the league. I mean, obviously there's other power plays on paper that are as good or maybe even better. I think the way Makar's been playing, special teams is there for the Avalanche. They've got the depth. They've gotten guys like Nemestikov. They have Donskoy. Even their fourth line, I mean, bringing in a guy like Bellemare. If Tyson Jost can play well in the playoffs. Their defense. I think their defense is very underrated, and people keep forgetting about that. Eric Johnson's a very good leader on that back end. Makar, Samuel Girard, Ian Cole is a very good guy to have in the playoffs. Definitely puts up those shot blocks. So my biggest concern for the Avalanche is goaltending. Francouz and Grubauer. They need one of those guys. I mean, Grubauer's their guy, and if he can come back healthy, then that's just the other perspective for the Avalanche. So I think that's the question mark. But if they can have goaltending, I think they're going to make noise in the playoffs. Obviously, they have tough matchups. I mean, if it's opening up against the Stars and then potentially the Blues, I think it's very comparable to the Tampa Bay Lightning in terms of early hard matchups. But we'll see. Regardless, I think the Avalanche are... This is not necessarily my hard order and how I see it going, but I would say the Avalanche are definitely up there and potentially number one for me in terms of Stanley Cup favorites. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you are new. Smash that like button. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. This was John from Hot Take Hockey. Have a good one and follow the TikTok. Peace out.